Lydia never thought her quiet life would be turned upside down by her own family. She was the kind of girl who stayed out of trouble, always obeyed her parents, and never argued when her older sister got all the attention. Her family lived in a small town, in an old house that still smelled faintly of her grandmother's perfume. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was steady, until everything changed one spring afternoon. Her sister Clara had always been the family's shining star. She was beautiful, confident, and ambitious. Wherever Clara went, attention followed. Lydia, on the other hand, was quieter. She preferred books and simple walks over grand parties or selfies. While Clara chased glamour, Lydia stayed in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. Their parents often compared them, though they tried to sound gentle when they did. "Lydia, learn from your sister," her mother would say. "Clara knows how to make things happen." When Clara announced her engagement to Ethan, the entire family was thrilled. Ethan seemed kind, soft-spoken, and polite. He wasn't the loud or showy type, which surprised everyone, especially since Clara usually liked people who could match her energy. He had a calm way about him, the kind that made people want to trust him instantly. He worked in what he described as a small business venture, and no one asked too many questions. He wasn't flashy, didn't show off money, and Clara seemed to like that. The engagement party was grand, filled with laughter, family friends, and endless photos of Clara smiling beside her quiet fiancé. But behind all that glamour, the family was hiding something. Money had been tight for months. Her father had lost a big investment, and her mother's small boutique wasn't doing well. Clara's wedding, though, had to be perfect, her mother insisted. She said it would save the family's reputation. They borrowed, cut corners, and even used Lydia's savings to pay for catering deposits. Lydia didn't argue. She told herself it was just money, and Clara was her sister. Family came first, she thought. One evening, Lydia was setting the table for dinner when she overheard her parents whispering in the kitchen. The words made her hands freeze. "What if he finds out?" her mother said. "If Ethan knows we're in debt, he might cancel everything." Her father sighed deeply. "We just need the wedding to happen. Once Clara marries him, things will settle down. He's reliable, that man. He'll take care of her and maybe help us too." Lydia felt a strange chill. They were talking about Ethan as if he were a solution to their problems, not a person. She didn't like that feeling. But before she could think more about it, Clara came in, dressed in a glittering robe, humming to herself and scrolling through her phone. She was too busy picking colors for her wedding theme to notice the worried looks on her parents' faces. Days turned into weeks, and the wedding day drew closer. The house was filled with boxes of flowers, dresses, and decorations. Lydia spent hours helping her sister, sewing ribbons and confirming guest lists. She didn't complain, even when Clara snapped at her for folding the napkins the wrong way. It was Clara's big moment, after all. Then one morning, just 3 weeks before the wedding, Clara vanished. At first, everyone thought it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she went on a short trip, or needed a break from the stress. But when her phone went unanswered for 2 days, panic set in. Lydia's mother cried constantly, and her father's temper grew shorter with each passing hour. They called her friends, searched hotels, and even went to her favorite cafes. No one had seen her. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The worst part was facing Ethan. He came over looking pale, his eyes filled with disbelief. "She didn't even tell me," he said quietly, almost to himself. "We spoke the night before. She said she was tired, that she just needed rest." Lydia wanted to comfort him, but the tension in the room was too heavy. Her parents sat in silence, their guilt and fear mixing in the air. The wedding invitations had already gone out, and the deposits were all non-refundable. If the wedding didn't happen, everything, money, reputation, and pride, would be lost. A few days later, Lydia's parents called her into the living room. Her mother's eyes were red, her hands twisting the corner of a handkerchief. Her father avoided eye contact. "Lydia," he began, "we have something difficult to ask." She nodded, waiting. He cleared his throat. "You know how important this wedding is for the family. We've spent everything. We can't cancel now. People will talk and we'll lose everything." Lydia frowned. "But Clara is gone. How can there be a wedding?" Her mother's eyes flickered with desperation. "You can stand in for her." Lydia froze. "What?" Her mother's voice trembled, but she pressed on. "You look enough like her. The ceremony can go on quietly. We'll say Clara isn't feeling well, and after some time, we can explain she wanted privacy. Ethan will understand. Lydia's voice shook. You want me to marry my sister's fiancé? Her father's voice rose. It's not forever. It's just, we need time. Once Clara comes back, we'll fix everything. Tears welled up in Lydia's eyes. You're asking me to lie? To marry someone who loves my sister? Her mother's voice cracked. We're asking you to save this family. Lydia couldn't speak. She looked at them both and saw not parents but desperate people cornered by their own choices. She wanted to scream to say no, but her heart ached seeing their fear. She had always been the quiet one, the one who fixed problems, the one who made sacrifices. Maybe this was just another thing she had to do. That night she sat by her window watching the moonlight fall on the quiet street. She thought of Ethan, the way he always greeted her kindly, never arrogant or dismissive. He didn't deserve this, and neither did she. But what could she do? Her parents were drowning, and she didn't have the heart to let them sink. After hours of silent tears, she made her decision. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen and said softly, I'll do it. Her mother let out a shaky breath of relief. Her father nodded, though guilt clouded his face. They began planning immediately, whispering about paperwork and small changes. Lydia's stomach twisted as she realized there was no turning back. The days that followed felt unreal. The dressmaker adjusted Clara's gown to fit Lydia's smaller frame. The veil was slightly altered to hide more of her face. They told the wedding planner that Clara had fallen ill and didn't want too many public photos. Every excuse was carefully prepared. The lie grew bigger by the day, wrapping itself around Lydia until she could barely breathe. Ethan was strangely calm through it all. When her parents told him that Clara couldn't go through with the ceremony but Lydia would stand in her place, he didn't argue much. He looked shocked at first, confused even, but then he simply said, if that's what the family wants. His tone gave nothing away. Lydia wondered what he truly thought. Did he feel betrayed, angry? Or was there something he wasn't showing? She couldn't tell. Every time their eyes met, there was a strange, unreadable sadness in his. The morning of the wedding came too soon. Lydia's hands trembled as she sat in front of the mirror. The white gown shimmered softly under the light, but she felt none of the joy a bride should feel. Her mother fussed with her veil, whispering, You look beautiful, my dear. Everything will be fine. Lydia forced a small smile, though her heart was heavy. Outside, guests were arriving. The church bells echoed through the air and music floated softly from the garden. Lydia could hear laughter and footsteps. Everything looked perfect from the outside, but inside she felt hollow. When she walked down the aisle, time seemed to slow. The guests rose, their eyes filled with admiration, none of them suspecting the truth. Ethan stood at the altar, calm as ever. His expression didn't change when he saw her, though for a fleeting second his gaze softened. Lydia didn't know if it was pity or understanding. The ceremony was a blur. Words were spoken, rings exchanged, and before she knew it, she was officially married to her sister's fiancé. Applause filled the air, cameras flashed, and her mother wiped tears of relief. Lydia smiled for the photos, but her heart was somewhere far away, whispering Clara's name. Later, in the quiet of their new home, Lydia sat alone in the guest room. It wasn't a big mansion like in movies, but it was peaceful. An elegant house on the outskirts of town surrounded by tall trees and a silent lake. Ethan entered, his expression calm but distant. He sat across from her, the silence stretching between them like an invisible wall. I know this isn't easy for you, he said finally, his voice gentle. It isn't easy for me either. She nodded, her throat tight. I didn't want this, she whispered. But they left me no choice. He looked at her for a long time before speaking. Your parents told me some of it. I agreed because, well, I thought it would help them. I didn't want a scene. And maybe I thought it would give Clara time wherever she is. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. Do you think she'll come back? He sighed. I don't know. But I hope she does. For a moment they sat in silence, both prisoners of decisions they didn't make. Lydia wanted to ask him about his work, his family, his life, but she couldn't find the courage. Everything felt too strange, too fragile. He eventually stood up, giving her a small nod. You can rest. I'll be in the study if you need anything. After he left, Lydia walked around the house, taking in the details. It was simple but elegant. Thick curtains, polished wooden floors, and paintings of quiet landscapes. Yet there were small signs of something she couldn't quite name. The furniture looked expensive, the silverware finely crafted, and there was an air of quiet wealth that didn't match the modest businessman image Ethan had. She noticed a stack of letters on his desk stamped with company logos she didn't recognize. Her curiosity grew, but she told herself to stay out of it, for now. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't help but wonder, who was Ethan, really? And what secrets did her sister leave behind when she vanished? The wind outside whispered through the trees, and the house creaked softly in the dark. Lydia felt both safe and uneasy, trapped between duty and fear. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep down, she sensed that the story was only beginning. The morning after the wedding, Lydia woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of birds outside the window. Sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, but it didn't bring her comfort. It only made her feel more out of place. The bed she lay on was too large, the room too elegant, and everything around her felt borrowed, like she was living someone else's life. She sat up slowly, still in the white nightgown her mother had packed for her. The memory of the wedding came rushing back. The vows, the smiles, the photographs, the way everyone pretended everything was normal. Her parents had been all smiles that day, greeting guests and thanking them as if nothing unusual had happened. But Lydia had seen the fear behind their smiles, the desperate relief that the lie had worked. Now that it was over, she felt empty. She was married to a man who didn't love her, and she didn't know what was expected of her anymore. There was a soft knock on the door. She froze for a moment, then heard Ethan's calm voice. "Breakfast is ready downstairs, take your time." His tone was polite, steady, like a man trying to keep everything simple. She waited until his footsteps faded before getting up. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the quiet sister anymore. She was someone caught in a web of family lies. Downstairs, the dining table was neatly set. A plate of eggs, toast, and fruit waited for her. Ethan sat at the other end of the table, sipping coffee. He looked relaxed, though there was something distant in his eyes. Lydia took her seat quietly. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice calm. "I tried," she said softly. There was a pause. He set down his cup and looked at her thoughtfully. "I want you to know something. I didn't agree to this because I wanted to replace Clara. I only did it because your parents begged me, and I thought it would buy some time. I don't expect anything from you." His honesty caught her off guard. "Thank you," she murmured. "I didn't want this either. I just didn't know what else to do." He nodded slowly. "I understand." They ate in silence for a while. The quiet between them wasn't cold. It was awkward, filled with unspoken questions. Lydia wanted to ask if he still loved Clara, or if he had any idea where she might be. But something in his calm face stopped her. He seemed like a man used to hiding emotions. After breakfast, Ethan offered to show her around the house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was big enough to feel grand compared to the home she came from. Every room was tidy and well decorated, with polished floors and old paintings. The air smelled faintly of wood and coffee. "This place belonged to my grandfather," Ethan explained. "He left it to me after he passed. I don't stay here often, but it's peaceful." Lydia nodded, running her fingers along the edge of a carved table. "It's beautiful. Peaceful, yes, maybe too quiet." He smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it." In the following days, Lydia tried to adjust to her new life. She took care of small chores, cooked meals, and kept herself busy with reading. Ethan spent most of his time in the study, working on his laptop or making phone calls. Whenever she walked past the study door, she'd hear the faint sound of him talking about business, numbers, contracts, and meetings. He wasn't the simple, struggling man her family had described. There was something much bigger behind his calm exterior. Sometimes she caught glimpses of it. Once she saw him step out of a sleek black car with tinted windows, speaking to a man in a suit. Another time, she noticed a large envelope delivered to him marked confidential. When she asked about it, he just smiled and said it was company paperwork. She didn't push further, though curiosity grew quietly inside her. In the evenings, they often sat in silence by the fireplace. Ethan would read the newspaper while Lydia watched the flames dance. Occasionally, he'd ask her small questions about her hobbies, her favorite books, or her thoughts on music. He never pried into her past or mentioned Clara. It was as if both of them had silently agreed not to open that wound. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, Lydia finally asked the question she'd been holding in for days. "Do you think Clara is coming back?" Ethan looked up from his paper. His eyes were steady but tired. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me hopes she does, but part of me thinks maybe she won't." "Did you love her?" Lydia asked quietly. He hesitated. "I thought I did," he said finally. "But sometimes what we think is love is just illusion. Clara liked the idea of a perfect life. I don't blame her for that. Maybe she realized she wasn't ready for what came with it." Lydia looked down at her hands. "You sound like you understand her." "I tried to," he said softly. "But understanding doesn't always mean staying." His words lingered in her mind long after he left the room. For the first time, Lydia wondered if there had been cracks in Clara's relationship with Ethan long before her disappearance. Maybe things hadn't been as perfect as they seemed. Weeks passed, and slowly the rhythm of the house began to change. Ethan wasn't distant anymore. He'd sometimes help Lydia in the kitchen or join her for evening walks by the lake. They didn't talk much, but there was a quiet comfort between them, a sense of peace that didn't need words. One afternoon, while tidying the living room, Lydia found a small photo frame tucked inside a drawer. It was a picture of Ethan, much younger, standing in front of a large building with a golden sign that read, Harper Industries. Behind him were several men in business suits. Ethan's expression was serious, confident. She turned the photo over and saw faint writing on the back. First contract signed, finally independent. The discovery puzzled her. She had never heard him mention the company before. That evening, she casually asked about it. "Ethan," she began, "I came across a photo of you with something called Harper Industries. Is that where you used to work?" He paused, setting down his coffee cup. There was a brief flicker in his expression, something between surprise and thoughtfulness. Then he smiled lightly. "You're curious." "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have looked through your things." "It's all right," he replied. "Yes, Harper Industries was mine. Still is, actually." "Yours?" Lydia blinked. "You own it?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her reaction. "Yes. My grandfather started it. I took over after he passed. But I keep a low profile. It helps me know who's real and who's pretending." Lydia stared at him, stunned. "So you're a businessman? A wealthy one?" He gave a small laugh. "Something like that. But I've learned not to lead with money. People change when they think you have it." Her mind spun. All those months her family believed Ethan was an ordinary man. They had no idea. Her parents' greed, Clara's choices, it all looked different now. Ethan had never lied about who he was. He simply never showed it. And somehow, that made him seem even more genuine. That night, Lydia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept circling, back to her parents and what they might have done if they had known the truth. They had already forced her into this marriage out of desperation. If they discovered Ethan was wealthy, what would they do next? The idea frightened her. The next morning, she decided not to tell them anything. Some truths were better left quiet, at least for now. As days turned into weeks, she began noticing how different life with Ethan was from what she had imagined marriage to be. He respected her space. He didn't demand anything from her or try to control her. He listened when she spoke, even when her words were small or uncertain. Slowly, her nervousness began to fade. One evening, while they were walking near the lake, Ethan told her about his childhood. "My parents passed away when I was young," he said quietly. "My grandfather raised me. He taught me that people's true colors show when you have nothing to offer them. Lydia looked at him thoughtfully. Is that why you hide your wealth? He smiled faintly. Partly, but also because peace is easier when people see you as ordinary. She nodded. You must think my family is terrible for what they did. He stopped walking and turned to her. No, he said softly. Desperate maybe, but not terrible. Sometimes people make wrong choices when they're afraid of losing everything. His understanding moved her, for the first time in a long, while Lydia felt seen, not as the quiet sister or the stand-in bride, but as a person. Their bond grew quietly, like a small light in a dark room. They still slept in separate rooms, but the air between them was warmer now. Lydia found herself waiting for his footsteps in the hallway, listening for his soft good night before she drifted off to sleep. Still, not everything was peaceful. Whispers from the outside world began to reach them. Some relatives called to ask why Clara never appeared in public. A few friends sent letters curious about her health. Lydia's parents brushed off the questions, insisting everything was fine. But the tension grew. One evening, Lydia's mother visited unannounced. She looked nervous and restless. As soon as she stepped into the house, her eyes roamed around, taking in every expensive detail. Lydia knew immediately that her mother suspected something. You've done well here, her mother said, forcing a smile. It's a beautiful home. Lydia offered tea and tried to keep the conversation light, but her mother's questions came quickly. Ethan seems to be doing quite well, doesn't he? I remember he said he worked in a small business. What kind of business is it again? Lydia's heart pounded. She didn't want to lie, but she couldn't tell the truth either. He manages different things, she said carefully. Mostly contracts and consulting. Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes sharp. I see. Before leaving, she took Lydia's hand and said quietly, If there's anything you're not telling me, you should. You know, families share things. After she left, Lydia sat down and cried quietly. She knew her mother's tone too well. It was the same tone she used when she was planning something. That night, Lydia told Ethan about the visit. He listened without interrupting, then said simply, Let me handle it. You don't have to worry. The next week, her parents stopped calling. Lydia suspected Ethan had spoken to them, though he never said how. She was grateful, but also a little afraid of what that meant. Months passed, and their life settled into a fragile peace. Lydia began to enjoy the quiet moments, the morning walks, the soft music, the shared dinners that didn't feel awkward anymore. Sometimes she'd catch Ethan looking at her with a warmth that wasn't there before, and her heart would beat faster. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she felt something growing between them, something real. But just as things started to feel calm, everything shifted again. One afternoon, while she was tending to the garden, a car pulled up the driveway. She wiped her hands and looked up, expecting a delivery. But when the door opened, her heart stopped. Clara stepped out. She looked different, thinner, paler, her once bright smile replaced with a sharp, cold stare. She didn't say a word as she walked toward the house. Lydia's hands trembled as she whispered her sister's name. Clara paused. Her eyes filled with something Lydia couldn't read, anger. Confusion, maybe jealousy. Hello, little sister, she said softly. I see I've missed quite a lot. Lydia couldn't move. She stood frozen near the garden path, her fingers still covered in soil from the flowers she had been planting. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. Clara stood a few steps away, looking every bit like a storm that had been waiting to break. Her once glossy hair looked dull, and her designer clothes hung loosely on her thin frame. But her eyes, those sharp, proud eyes, hadn't changed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves and the hum of wind. Then Clara gave a short laugh, the kind that wasn't really a laugh at all. So, she said quietly, you really did it. Lydia swallowed hard. Clara, you disappeared. We didn't know where you went. Everyone was, oh, don't act innocent, Clara snapped, stepping closer. You married him, my fiancé. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Lydia's voice trembled. It wasn't like that. I didn't want this. I tried to stop it. But you didn't, Clara interrupted sharply. You went through with it. You stood where I was supposed to stand. You wore the dress that was made for me. You said the vows meant for me. Lydia felt tears sting her eyes. You left, Clara. You ran away before the wedding. No one knew what to do. You only saved yourself, Clara said bitterly. You've always been the quiet one, the obedient one. But I never thought you'd steal from me. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. Ethan had come out onto the porch, his expression calm but his eyes watchful. When he saw Clara, he froze for a brief moment before walking toward her. Clara, he said slowly, you're back. Clara turned to face him, her anger shifting into something colder. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, he said simply. I always thought you'd come back when you ran out of options. Her jaw tightened. You think you know me? I do, Ethan replied quietly. Maybe better than you think. Clara let out a soft, sarcastic laugh. So what now? You're happy with your replacement? You think this, she waved her hand toward Lydia, makes everything fine? Ethan didn't raise his voice. What happened between us ended when you chose to disappear without a word. I didn't chase you then, and I'm not chasing you now. Clara looked at him in disbelief. You're defending her? I'm telling you the truth, he said evenly. You made your choice. Lydia could barely breathe. The tension between them was unbearable. Clara's eyes flicked between them and something like realization flashed across her face. So she knows, Clara said suddenly. She knows what you really are. The rich man hiding behind a poor man's clothes. Ethan's expression didn't change. I never hid anything from you, Clara. I just didn't advertise it. She laughed bitterly. You told me you ran a small business. You let me believe you were ordinary. If I had known the truth, you would have stayed. He asked quietly. Clara hesitated, then looked away. Maybe I wouldn't have left. Maybe things would have been different. That's exactly why I didn't tell you, Ethan said. His tone was calm but firm. Because love built on money isn't love at all. Clara's lips trembled, and for a second, Lydia saw something fragile in her. Pain, regret, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She turned to Lydia, her voice trembling with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what people will say when they find out you married the man meant for me? Lydia's tears finally fell. Clara, I never wanted to take your place. I was forced. I did it because they begged me. Because I thought you weren't coming back. I didn't even know the truth about Ethan until recently. Clara shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. You always were the perfect daughter doing what they said. And somehow it still worked out for you, didn't it? Worked out? Lydia whispered. I've lived every day afraid you'd come back and hate me. I've lived in guilt since that day. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence between them was thick with everything that couldn't be said. Finally, Ethan spoke softly. Clara, I think you should come inside. We can talk properly. Clara looked at him for a moment, then brushed past them both and entered the house. Lydia followed, her hands trembling. Inside, Clara walked around the living room, her eyes darting across the furniture, the paintings, the expensive details she hadn't known about before. Her voice was sharp when she spoke. So this is where you've been hiding. All this time you had money, power, everything, and you let me think you were just another small-town man. Ethan stayed calm. You never asked, Clara. You were too busy planning how to show off your perfect wedding. She spun around. Don't you dare make this about me. You lied to me. You let me walk away thinking you couldn't give me the life I deserved. He sighed quietly. You didn't walk away because of that. You left because you met someone else. Lydia's eyes widened. What? Clara froze. That's not true. Ethan's voice stayed calm. You disappeared to go with a man you met in the city. He promised you adventure and luxury. You thought he was rich, but he wasn't. He used you. And when you realized that, you came back. Clara's face went pale. You think you know everything. I know enough, he said softly. I knew where you went. I just didn't think there was a point in telling your parents. They were already broken enough. Lydia looked at her sister, shocked and heartbroken. Clara, is that true? Clara's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Instead, she sat down on the sofa, her eyes filling with tears. I made a mistake, she whispered. I thought I could have something better. I didn't realize what I was leaving behind. Ethan nodded slowly. It happens. We all learn the hard way. The room was quiet for a while. Lydia wanted to comfort her sister, but she didn't know how. Everything between them felt fragile now, like one wrong word could break it completely. Finally, Clara wiped her eyes and looked at Ethan again. So what happens now? Are you going to divorce her and marry me like this never happened? Lydia's heart stopped. She looked at Ethan, waiting for his answer, But his reply was calm and steady. "No," he said softly. "That's not going to happen." Clara's eyes widened. "What? I've moved on," he said. "This marriage may not have started the right way, but it's real now. I won't undo it." Clara stared at him as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You can't be serious. You think you're in love with her?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I think I could be." Lydia's breath caught. She wasn't expecting that. Her heart raced and her cheeks flushed. She wanted to speak, but no words came out. Clara stood up, shaking her head. "This is unbelievable. You two deserve each other." "Clara," Lydia said softly, "please don't." But Clara was already walking toward the door. Before she left, she turned back and said coldly, "You'll regret this, both of you." The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like a thunderclap. For a long time, Lydia stood there unable to move. Ethan didn't speak either. Finally she whispered, "She hates me." Ethan turned to her gently. "No, she hates herself, and she's taking it out on you." Lydia sat down, feeling drained. "I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to help." "I know," he said quietly, "but sometimes life doesn't ask what we want. It just gives us choices, and we do our best with them." He poured her a glass of water and sat beside her. "You've handled this with more strength than anyone could expect." She looked up at him, tears still in her eyes. "I don't feel strong." "You are," he said softly. "You're the only one who told the truth, even when it hurt." In the days that followed, Clara didn't return, but her presence lingered like a shadow. Lydia's parents called often, confused and worried. They wanted to know if Clara had been found, but Lydia couldn't tell them everything. Ethan handled most of the conversations, reassuring them that things were under control. Lydia, meanwhile, felt caught between guilt and relief. She missed her sister but also feared her return. Every time the phone rang or a car stopped outside, her heart skipped a beat. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Clara. The handwriting was shaky and the paper slightly crumpled. Lydia opened it with trembling hands. The letter was short. "I'm leaving town for a while. Maybe forever. Don't try to find me. You've won, Lydia, you always do. Tell them I'm fine. Maybe one day I'll forgive you. Maybe not." Lydia folded the letter slowly, tears falling on the paper. She didn't feel like she had won anything. When Ethan came home that evening, she handed him the letter. He read it quietly and then looked at her with a kind expression. "She'll heal eventually," he said. "Some things take time," Lydia nodded, wiping her eyes. "I just wish things could have been different." "They already are," he said gently. "You're not living in lies anymore." As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. Ethan started sharing more about his business, about how he'd built it from the ground up, how he'd learned to hide his wealth after being betrayed by people he trusted. Lydia listened with quiet admiration. She began to see him not as her sister's fiancé, but as a man with depth and kindness. One night, while they were sitting by the fireplace, Ethan said softly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently? If your sister hadn't left?" Lydia looked into the fire. "Maybe you'd be married to her and I'd still be at home worrying about bills and trying to fix their problems. Do you wish that?" he asked. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I wish no one had been hurt." "But I don't regret knowing you." He smiled gently. "Neither do I." Silence fell again, but this time it was warm, not heavy. Lydia felt something new blooming between them, something fragile but real. As the fire crackled softly, she realized how far she had come from the girl who once obeyed every word her parents said. She had made choices, faced storms, and stood her ground. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, she no longer felt lost. Outside, the night was calm. The moon reflected softly on the lake, and for the first time in months, Lydia felt peace. She didn't know where Clara was, or if she would ever return. But deep down, she hoped her sister would one day find the same peace she had finally begun to feel. And somewhere in her heart, Lydia knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning of something new. Weeks turned into months, and life began to feel almost normal again. The quiet house that once echoed with tension now carried a softer rhythm. Lydia had grown used to Ethan's calm presence. They often had breakfast together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing small stories about their day. The air between them was different now, warmer, lighter, almost peaceful. Lydia found comfort in the routines she built. She'd wake early, open the windows to let in the morning air, and tend to the flowers outside. Ethan would leave for work meetings or sometimes handle them from his study. At night, they'd sit by the fire and talk about everything except the past. It wasn't love yet, not completely, but there was a sense of safety, something she hadn't felt in a long time. But peace never stayed long in her life. It always seemed to slip away just when she started to believe in it. One chilly afternoon, Lydia was folding laundry when she heard the phone ring in the hall. She answered, expecting to hear her mother's voice, but the tone on the other end made her heart drop. "Lydia," her mother whispered urgently, "you need to come home. Is everything all right?" Lydia asked, gripping the phone tightly. "No," her mother said, her voice breaking. "Your sister is back." Lydia froze. For a moment she couldn't breathe. "Back, you mean Clara? She came home?" "Yes," her mother replied. "She showed up this morning. She's angry, Lydia, very angry. She's saying terrible things. Please come." The call ended before Lydia could say more. She stood there for a long time, staring at the receiver, her heart pounding. She knew this day would come, but she hadn't expected it so soon. When Ethan returned from his meeting, she told him what happened. He listened quietly, his eyes serious but calm. "I knew she would come back eventually," he said softly. "But you don't have to go if you're not ready." "I have to," Lydia said firmly. "They're my family, no matter what's happened. I need to face this." Ethan nodded. "Then I'll come with you." The drive to her parents' house felt longer than it ever had before. The air was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Lydia stared out the window, her mind racing through memories. Childhood laughter, family dinners, the old life that seemed so far away now. When they arrived, her mother was waiting at the door. She looked worn out, her eyes red from crying. "She's inside," she whispered. "She won't calm down." Lydia stepped into the living room, and there she was, Clara. She sat on the couch, arms crossed, eyes full of fire. The sight of her sister after so long filled Lydia with both sadness and fear. "So you decided to show up," Clara said coldly. "How kind of you." Lydia swallowed hard. "Clara, I came because you're guilty?" Clara interrupted. "You should be." "Clara, please," their mother said softly. "Let's not do this now." Clara ignored her. "You think you can just live happily with my husband and pretend none of this happened?" Ethan stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "Clara, I was never truly your husband. You left before we were married. What happened after was a decision your parents made." She glared at him. "A decision you agreed to." He nodded. "Yes, because I thought it would help them. Not because I wanted to replace you." Clara stood up, her anger trembling just beneath the surface. "Don't pretend to be noble, Ethan. You always liked her, didn't you? Even before I left." Lydia shook her head quickly. "That's not true." "You're twisting things, am I?" Clara sneered. "He looks at you the way he never looked at me." Her words stung. Lydia wanted to defend herself, to explain that she never asked for any of this. But Clara's pain was too deep, too tangled with jealousy and regret. Anything Lydia said would only sound like another excuse. Their father came in then, looking tired and uneasy. "Enough," he said quietly. "We can't keep fighting like this." Clara turned to him sharply. "You did this too. You forced her to marry him. You turned us into enemies." Her father lowered his head. "I made mistakes. I thought I was saving this family." "You destroyed it," Clara spat. The room fell into silence. Lydia's mother began to cry softly. Ethan stood near the doorway, his expression unreadable. The air felt thick, heavy with years of secrets finally spilling out. After a long pause, Ethan spoke. "Clara, I think you deserve the truth. You keep talking about what was taken from you, but you left first. You walked away without a word. Do you even remember what you said to me the night before you disappeared?" Clara's lips parted, but she didn't answer. "You said you wanted a life bigger than this town," he continued. "You said you couldn't stand living with someone who was too simple, too ordinary. You didn't want a husband. You wanted a stage. You wanted admiration, not love." Clara's eyes shimmered with tears, but she stayed silent. Ethan sighed. "And when you left, I let you go. I didn't try to stop you because I thought that's what you wanted." Lydia looked at her sister, whose face had gone pale. Clara's hands trembled slightly, and her voice softened when she finally spoke. "I thought I was making the right choice," she whispered. "But it wasn't what I imagined. Everything fell apart. The man I left with, he lied to me. He promised me a new life, but he just used me. When I realized it, I was too ashamed to come back. Their mother wiped her tears. "Oh, Clara." "I came back," Clara continued, "because I wanted to fix things. But then I found out you two were living together, married, and it felt like everything I'd thrown away had become hers." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "It never felt like mine." "I never wanted your life, Clara. I just wanted to help. I did what I was told. I was scared." Clara looked at her for a long time, her anger softening a little. For the first time, Lydia saw not the furious sister who had returned, but the broken one who had lost herself along the way. "I don't know how to forgive you," Clara whispered, "but I also don't know how to hate you anymore." Lydia took a shaky breath. "Then maybe we can start there. We don't have to fix everything right now. We just have to stop hurting each other." Their mother moved closer and took both their hands, her voice trembling. "You're sisters. Whatever happened, that will never change." For the first time in months, the tension in the room began to fade. Clara looked down, tears spilling freely now. "I just wanted to be loved," she whispered. Ethan's voice was gentle when he spoke. "You were, Clara. You just couldn't see it." Clara nodded slowly, her expression distant. She didn't stay much longer after that. She said she needed time to think, time to find herself again. Before she left, she hugged Lydia, a hesitant, fragile hug that carried both pain and forgiveness. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. When she was gone, Lydia sat quietly on the old sofa, feeling like the storm had finally passed. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. "You did well," he said softly. "That couldn't have been easy." "I just wanted peace," she said quietly. "For all of us," he smiled faintly. "You have a way of bringing that wherever you go." The next few weeks were calm again. Lydia and Ethan returned home, both feeling lighter. They spent more time together now, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They shared dinners, laughter, and even small arguments about who forgot to water the plants. Life felt real, simple, but full. One evening, as they walked along the lake, Ethan stopped suddenly. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and pink. He turned to her and said quietly, "I've been thinking about something." Lydia looked up at him, curious. "What is it?" "When this all started," he said slowly, "we were both trapped, by lies, by expectations, by other people's choices. But somehow through all of that, you became the one person I trust completely." She felt her heart beat faster. "Ethan," he smiled gently, "I'm not asking for an answer right now. I just wanted you to know that I care about you, not because of what happened, but because of who you are." Lydia's eyes softened. "You've been kind to me when you didn't have to. That means more than you know." They stood there quietly watching the sunset. Neither of them said another word, but something unspoken passed between them, something honest and pure. Later that night, Lydia sat by the window in her room, thinking about everything that had happened. Her family's lies, Clara's return, Ethan's truth, all of it had led her here, to this quiet moment where she finally felt free. The next morning, a letter arrived. It was from Clara again. This one was different, longer, calmer. Lydia opened it and began to read. "Dear Lydia, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I've realized that running away didn't make me brave. It made me selfish. I blamed everyone else because it was easier than facing myself. But now I see that you never tried to steal my life. You were just trying to survive it. I don't know where my road will take me next, but I hope one day I can come back not as your enemy, but as your sister again. Take care of him, and take care of yourself, Clara." Lydia wiped her tears, smiling softly. For the first time, she believed her sister would be all right. When Ethan came in and saw her holding the letter, he asked gently, "Good news?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "She's healing," he smiled. "So are you." Lydia looked out the window, watching the sunlight spill over the garden. For so long, her life had been filled with chaos, lies, and heartbreak. But now there was peace. Not perfect peace, but the kind that comes after a storm. The kind you learn to protect because you know how easily it can be lost. She turned back to Ethan, her eyes warm. "I think we all are," she said softly. And in that simple moment, everything finally felt right. The months that followed were calm in a way Lydia had never known before. The chaos that had once filled her days had been replaced by quiet mornings, gentle laughter, and a strange sense of peace she still wasn't used to. The house no longer felt like a place borrowed through lies. It felt like home now, warm, lived in, and filled with small, honest moments. Every morning, Ethan would make tea while Lydia tended to the garden. She had started growing her own herbs and flowers, and the backyard slowly turned into a colorful space full of life. Sometimes she'd look around and still feel disbelief that this was where her story had led her. After everything, this quiet, simple life was hers, but deep inside, Lydia still carried a quiet ache, a question she had never asked out loud. Who was Ethan, really? She knew him as the calm, kind man who had stood beside her through everything, but she had always felt there was more he wasn't saying. His life seemed too carefully managed, too private, and there were moments when she'd catch him staring out the window with a faraway look, as if remembering a life he had left behind. One afternoon, while organizing the study, Lydia found a small wooden box in one of the lower drawers. She wasn't looking for secrets, just some old papers, but the box drew her attention. It was beautifully carved, old and worn, the kind of box that carried stories. She hesitated, her fingers brushing against it lightly, then lifted the lid. Inside were a few documents and an old photograph. The picture showed a younger Ethan standing beside an older man in front of a large building with glass walls. They both looked proud, smiling at something just out of the frame. Behind them was a company logo she didn't recognize. Beneath the photo was a folded letter with a crest stamped in gold ink. Curiosity tugged at her. She knew she shouldn't read it, but something inside told her she needed to understand the man she had married, the man who had stood by her even when he didn't have to. She opened the letter carefully. It was addressed to Mr. Ethan Vale and signed by a board of directors from a major investment company. Her eyes scanned the lines and her heart began to race as she realized what it said. Ethan wasn't just a small business owner. He was the major shareholder of a global firm, someone with immense influence and quiet wealth. The letter spoke of projects, partnerships, and figures so large they hardly seemed real. She sat there in silence, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. Hidden millionaire, that phrase echoed in her mind. Her family had forced her into this marriage without knowing the truth, that the man they thought was ordinary was anything but. And Ethan had never told her. Just then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Ethan appeared at the door holding a folder, his expression unreadable. He stopped when he saw the box in her hands. "You found it," he said softly. Lydia froze. "I wasn't looking for it." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." He shook his head gently. "It's all right. You were bound to find out someday." She placed the letter down carefully. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Why hide who you are?" He leaned against the doorway, thinking for a moment before answering. "Because money changes people, Lydia. It changes how they look at you, how they talk to you, how they decide if you're worth their time. I didn't want to be seen for what I had. I wanted to live like everyone else, to know who cared for me. Not my name, not my wealth." Lydia nodded slowly, understanding but still trying to process it. "And Clara? Did she know?" He sighed. "She didn't. I never told her either. I wanted someone who would choose me for who I was, not what I could offer. That's why I told your family I owned a small business. But after she left, I realized she probably never would have cared about the truth." Lydia looked down, her voice quiet. "So all this time you were living like an ordinary man when you could have had anything?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes ordinary is worth more than anything money can buy." She studied him for a long moment. There was no pride in his voice, no arrogance, just honesty. She realized then that he had built his life carefully, protecting his peace by keeping his truth hidden. It wasn't deceit. It was self-preservation. Still, the weight of what she had discovered lingered. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about everything. Her family's desperation, the lies, the wedding that never should have happened, and now this. She wondered how different things might have been if her parents had known the truth. Would they have forced her into the marriage even faster? Or would they have treated Ethan differently, trying to win his favor? The next morning, she decided to visit her parents. Ethan didn't stop her. He just smiled and said, "Go. You'll feel better if you talk to them." When she arrived, her mother greeted her with a tired smile. Things had calmed down between them, though the guilt still hung in the air like a quiet shadow. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," Lydia said as they sat in the living room. "I think I finally understand why you did what you did. You were scared." Her mother looked down. "We were desperate. I thought if we could just hold things together long enough, everything would be okay. I didn't think about what it would do to you." Lydia nodded. I know, but I need you to know something now. Ethan isn't who we thought he was. Her mother frowned. What do you mean? Lydia explained gently, telling her about the letter, the company, and how Ethan had hidden his wealth because he wanted a simple life. Her parents listened in stunned silence. When she finished, her father leaned back, speechless. So all this time, he whispered. We forced you into a marriage thinking it was a way to survive, and it turns out he never needed us at all. Lydia's voice softened. He never wanted anyone to know. He didn't want people using him. I think that's why he stayed kind to me, because I never treated him like something to gain. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. We thought we were saving you, but you were the one saving us all along. Lydia smiled sadly. No, we just all made mistakes and learned from them. Before leaving, she hugged them both, something she hadn't done in a long time. It felt like forgiveness, quiet and unspoken, but real. When she got home that evening, Ethan was sitting by the fireplace, reading. He looked up when she entered and smiled. How did it go? They understand now, she said softly. And they're sorry. He nodded. Good. Maybe now we can all move forward.